Tell David to send us all.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Layan and I am the Director of Education here at the People's Forum. And I'm really, really excited to welcome you all to this very important event and conversation. If you haven't been here before, the People's Forum is a center for political education and culture to build movements of the working class and the marginalized here in New York City, across the world, and internationally. And we're really, really excited to have this event in which we're going to talk about the urgency of lifting the blockade on two communities that are references for the resistance against US and Zionist imperialism, Gaza and Cuba. It is really, really important for us to be able to have this kind of exchange, especially at the People's Forum, where we are embedded in internationalist movement building. And what that means to us is that we have to understand that even if we are not experiencing what our friends and comrades across the world are experiencing, we are facing the same struggle. And so it's essential for us to be able to have this exchange, to learn from each other's struggles, to see the similarities and the differences, and to embed ourselves and commit ourselves again and again to supporting people's movements, to the liberation of all peoples around the world, and to bringing down US imperialism. So it is a very timely event as well. We have just witnessed another horrendous attack on Gaza just this week, leaving almost 50 people dead, many, many more wounded, and 15 of those were children who were killed. Again, also, Cuba has been suffering major consequences of the US blockade, and there was a major fire just recently that has decimated the energy system of the island. So these are critical and urgent moments, but there are also moments where we're seeing the resistance of the people come out stronger and stronger. And so there's a lot for us to learn. And so I'm really, really honored to welcome here Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi to help bring us, who has visioned this event and to help bring us through the program, and also to share with us her very important perspectives and analysis and vision for how we should move forward. Rabab Abdulhadi is the Director of Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies. Also, she is a professor at San Francisco State University, but most importantly, she is a reference for the struggle against Zionism. She is dedicated to building community resistance and building community capacity to continue the fight. She is tirelessly working for the struggle for Palestinian liberation. I actually don't know how she keeps going at the pace that she does. She's always doing a million things. So it's really great to have her here. And Dr. Rabab, I will pass it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Buenas tardes, مساء الخير, good evening, assalamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan. Thank you all for being here. We always begin by doing land acknowledgement. acknowledging that the land we are at today here in New York, in the East Coast, is the land of the Lenape people who have been displaced and expelled from their land. And my own university, San Francisco State University, sits on the unceded, also stolen land of the Ohlone people. It's always important to do that. And it's also even more important to do that when we're speaking about Palestine and a land where there are a people who have been forgotten, who also want to be repatriated to their land. I want to thank everybody who is here today, and also give a few moments of gratitude to several people who participated in this. First, I would really like to thank the People's Forum. The People's Forum, not only for doing this event, but also for the amazing role they played. I was at the People's Summit in LA, and I think that was a testament that was attended by over 1,000 people, compared with the no-show state summit that Biden has organized. Say no more, we can discuss it if you'd like. But the People's Summit also gave us refuge when the AMED Studies Facebook page was took down. And it was the People's Forum who gave us the opportunity to be able to hold our events online, including the Harlem Legacies event, including the event on the 50th anniversary of the first Black radical statement on Palestine that was published in the New York Times, with editors, co-editors, signers, and other activists, including some people here at the table. And we've done a lot of events that the People's Forum had enabled us to do. You can now see them on AMED Facebook page that we have been able to get back due to the amazing social activism of social media groups in Palestine, as well as the coalition of No Tech for Apartheid that has been very much involved in it. Please check them out, support them, join the campaigns, sign the statements. I also want to thank Layan and David, who are specifically have been working with us here from the People's Forum. And I would also want to thank from the team who worked on this, the Teaching Palestine team. We have several people who have worked with us on this. Laith Ghouloum, graduate student in ethnic studies at San Francisco State University, who has just finished their MA and has gone on to start a PhD program at University of Minnesota, their favorite place, with flying colors and amazing, amazing fellowship. Their gain, our loss. Salim Shhade, who is a former AMED student, finished his MA at San Francisco State University and now writing his PhD, a doctoral dissertation on the Palestinian activism in the US and throughout the world. Gobs, and has just returned from a field trip in Palestine and Jordan at University of California, Los Angeles. And then we also have new people who are joining us. Mariam Karim, who's a doctoral student at University of Toronto, who's doing her PhD now, and who's actually has the translation of the videos you're going to see is also Mariam's work. And she's a graphic artist, and now she's an intern with us. And Dr. Jamila Ghaddar, who was both Mariam and Jamila are Lebanese, and Dr. Jamila Ghaddar has finished her PhD last year from University of Toronto. She was the union leader of the graduate student at University of Toronto and wrote her PhD on archives, specifically French archives, and also specifically how the French archives has affected the indigenous communities in what is called Canada today, including the children in the so-called residential schools. So this came as a very important moment, and Dr. Ghaddar also has archived the papers of Constantine Zrek. Dr. Constantine Zrek is the spiritual father of the Arab National Movement. She has archived all his papers at the American University of Beirut and many, so she's been also part of the team voluntarily. I would also like to thank a couple of people from Gaza, especially Muhammad Abu Nasser, who has been working with all the social media folks in Gaza. They have 200 people doing media, tweeting. It's trending. He says it's trending. I don't know what trending is, but Muhammad tell me it's trending. And I said, explain to me what trending means. He said, check your Twitter account. So they are the ones who organize all the campaigns, and you will see them now. Gaza under attack, left Cuba, Gaza blockade, let Cuba, Gaza live. They've been doing a lot of stuff, organizing with each other. And I want to say that this is under very difficult conditions in Gaza, where there is no electricity. People get 6 hours of electricity a day. There is no clean water. There is all sorts of siege attacks, bombing, and so on. And these young people came together and did that. This is really amazing. And we also with him, working with him, is Layla Rizek and Arafat Muhammad, who are also part of the social media. I'm part of a group called Sada Social, who have been supportive of us. And last but not least here, I want to also thank Gail Walker and IFCO, who has been amazingly supportive historically of Palestine, of Cuba, and have actually almost lost their tax-exempt status. Lost and gained it back about Palestine, which is a huge victory. So this is really important to kind of like give the gratitude. Finally, Carlos Latouf, the Brazilian cartoonist, actually designed a specific graphic for our event and tweeted about it. So if you go on Twitter, you can actually find the Cuban and the Palestinian flag next to each other with raised fist and so on. The reason I'm saying all of this stuff, it's really important to understand and recognize the coalitions and how widespread the support for Palestine and for Cuba is. Despite the noise pollution that you might hear from Washington or from the Zionist groups, and they speak louder because they have more resources and they have more money and they have more power and so on. But at the end of the day, we do know with the resistance of Gaza and Cuba and everywhere else, you cannot defeat people. And I say this because today is also the anniversary of the fall of Tel Zatar, the Palestinian camp in 1976 that is no longer in Beirut, in Lebanon. It completely fell. And we were actually trying to get a doctor who was the last doctor at the Gaza hospital in Tel Zatar to speak to us, but we were not able, but we will do it in the future. And last, I think it's also important to remember that tomorrow is the birthday of the late leader Fidel Castro, may he rest in power, and that we also recognize, and this anniversary is not an accident. Today, doing this today is not an accident. There is a reason for it. This project is part of a Teaching Palestine project, Teaching Palestine Pedagogical Praxis and the Indivisibility of Justice, in which we commemorate certain things. And this year, 2022, and you can check it on the AMED website, this year we are recognizing several anniversaries. First one is the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Palestinian intellectual and author and leader Ghassan Kanafani, who has actually never carried a gun and never held a bullet. He was a writer, author, artist, journalist. And he is actually the one who opened up the pages of his magazine to Najil Ali, the Palestinian cartoonist, who was assassinated on August 29th in London. We are commemorating we're protesting the 15th year of the blockade of Gaza and bringing the solidarity with Cuba and Gaza together. So we believe that this is really important to bring together communities and actually have people also know about each other. Many people know about Cuba, many people know about Gaza, but in the interim, there is small number of interlapping communities. So one of the things about building struggle and the indivisibility of justice is actually advancing how much we know about each other. What are the similarities? What are the differences? How can we build solidarities? What are the things we can learn from each other's struggle and so on? The third anniversary is the 20th anniversary of the Israeli apartheid wall that was built 20 years ago that locks in Palestinian communities, and actually when they built it, they divided the West Bank into 64 pieces, 64 districts, preventing people from seeking medicine and all sorts of things. And we can also, we will be able to discuss that. And the 20th anniversary of the Jenin massacre, which was a massacre that was committed in the Jenin refugee camp 20 years ago. And some of the people who fought were killed. Some of the people, if you watch a film called Arna's Children, we're doing a very big film series called Picturing Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians film series. And we will show it about the Jenin theater in which all these kids have participated. Some were killed, some were the heroes of the tunnel who escaped from prison. And the Jenin camp, there is still battles going on. And you may know, because it was in the news, the assassination of Shireen Abu Akleh, who was a Palestinian-American journalist, who was assassinated by a bullet by an Israeli sniper in her neck while she was wearing a helmet and wearing a vest saying the press. And so which was very clearly about assassinating truth and silencing Palestine. And the final and perhaps one of the most central anniversaries is the 40th anniversary of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon on June 6, 1982. the siege of Beirut of over almost 3 months, and the Sabra and Shatila massacres on September 17th, 1982. And in that, we will be doing, there is a delegation that is going to be going to Beirut, and you will soon receive, check out the website, you will receive the call for applications. If you are interested, you can fill it out, submit proposals and so on for a conference and a delegation in Beirut, and for a conference in Tunisia at the Insaniyat Conference 2022 on September 19th. But I go back and I say, why is Beirut really, really important, the invasion of Lebanon? Because the invasion of Lebanon was also a moment at which many people organize. And in the US, there was huge organization, but 6 days later, there was 1 million people marching in Central Park in New York, demanding nuclear disarmament. And the organizers refused to allow a Palestinian or a Lebanese speaker to speak. We've come a long way. We've come a long way since then. And a lot of things have happened. So we are trying to also understand the oral histories and the archival knowledge and interview the living archives, what we call the living archives, the people who are walking around and knowing history in their minds and so on, who organized then. We had over 100 organizations participating in something that's called the November 29th Coalition. And then it became the November 29th Coalition for Palestine. Then we changed it to Palestine Solidarity Committee, because somehow when endorsements were written, they will say November 29th Coalition and they'll drop Palestine. And they'll pretend that it was such a typo or something. So we said, okay, we'll put Palestine up front. It's very difficult to kind of like delete it, right? And so, but we also want to be able to hear the voices of the witnesses, the voices of the survivors, the voices of the people who are at the center of it. How can we place the people who are victimized at the center and who are resisting at the center? And how can we not think of things only as victims, but also as people standing up, demanding their own rights and speaking up for themselves? The last thing that I will mention about why we came together also, there is a very clear Cuban connection. There's several Cuban connections. One is that Cuba has taken in many of the Palestinian children of the martyrs after Sabra and Shatila to teach them in Cuba. Many of the activists actually were there. The Cuban ambassador actually was held under siege in Beirut. He had the chance to leave, but he stuck under siege with the Palestinians in Beirut. And he became the first secretary of the Cuban embassy in New York. So he has been here as well. And so, and then if you go to Cuba, and even if you don't go to Cuba, if you read the history of Cuba, you know that Che Guevara went to and expressed support for the Palestinians. History that's not known that there were the Cubans who fought with the Palestinians in the Karama battle in 1968. This is history not known. This is oral history that's not known, that this is some of the stuff that we actually found when we were visiting Cuba, when we did Teaching Palestine at the Caribbean Studies Association 2018. And they gave us the best hall that's called Solidaridad, and that had the translation French, Spanish, English at the time. So, I mean, it was a signal also from the host what they wanted to do. And of course, we visited OSPAL and so on. We can discuss this, but this goes very, very long. And Cuba is always standing solid with the Palestinians. And the Palestinians are always inspired by Cuba, by the steadfastness, by resilience, by the resistance. So one of the things we really want to do is to be able to connect our communities together. This is the opening launch of the event. We have amazing people who have just come. Gail has just come back from Cuba. We have Claudia de la Cruz, who's the executive director of the People's Forum, who's stuck in traffic, but she will be with us. And we have tons of people who are going to be participating with us by videos from Gaza. They actually were able to register messages because A, it's 2 a.m. in Gaza now. There is no electricity. And B, we also didn't want to take chances. So we asked people to record in order for us to do it, as well as one of the major organizers of Cuban Solidarity in Canada, Professor Isaac Artie, who is originally from Trinidad, who will be also giving us a message. So this is part of the program. We will hear the message, we'll hear from the speakers, we will be able to discuss back and forth, talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and so on. Just have a conversation with all of you. We have people joining us online, and people join us today, and then they keep joining again and again and watching again and again, so they cannot really silence. I mean, they can try, but as long as we're speaking up and we're defending ourselves and we're standing up for our rights, they can silence us, they can try, but they cannot silence us. So thank you all for coming. And now I'm going to turn it over to the videos and David. I mentioned David and Leanne. Yes, I did. I'm sorry. Okay, I did. I'm kind of like, okay. So David is going to be showing us some of the videos, and then we are going to be alternating between videos and speakers. So thank you so much, and welcome to this.
أحدثكم من غزة المحاصرة، من فلسطين المحتلة، غزة التي تجابه كل يوم حصارا ظالما يطال كل مناحي حياة كل إنسان يعيش على هذه الأرض. يلاحقنا الحصار على كل حق، بل على كل حلم، فلا طفل ولا شاب ولا امرأة ولا رجل ولا كهل ولا مريض لم يأكل الحصار من عمره وحياته. قد يصدم الكثير أن هناك شعب في العام 2022 ولا زال لا يستطيع التنقل والحركة بحرية من حدود بلاده لأي مكان في العالم، حتى لو كان يحتضر ويواجه خطر الموت. لا يمكننا اختيار حق التعليم في الجامعة التي نريدها، ولا حق السفر ولا حق العلاج. يريدون أن يصادروا منا حتى الحق في الحياة الذي لطالما مزقته آلة الحرب الإسرائيلية على مر سنوات الصراع مع هذا المحتل. لقد عانى ويعاني آلاف الطلبة من آثار هذا الحصار المجرم المفروض على غزة، وبسبب الأوضاع المعيشية الصعبة التي نتجت بسبب سنوات الحصار المتتالية ارتفعت أعداد الطلبة المنقطعين عن التعليم بشكل كبير، سواء كانوا عازفين عن التعليم الجامعي أو حتى من بدأوا الدراسة الجامعية ولم يستطيعوا إكمالها بسبب عدم مقدرة الطلبة وأهاليهم على تحمل التكاليف اللازمة لإكمال المسيرة التعليمية، حيث يقف الطلاب في منتصف الطريق ولا يستطيعون إكمال دراستهم والحصول على الشهادة الجامعية. وبسبب هذا الحصار أيضا كانت هناك مؤسسات وجمعيات خيرية كانت مختصة في توفير المنح الدراسية للطلبة ومساعدتهم في أثناء فترة الجامعة أو فترة الدراسة، لكن بسبب هذا الحصار والإجراءات المالية الصارمة الظالمة المفروضة على الأموال التي يتم تحويلها إلى غزة، هذه المؤسسات توقفت عن هذا الدعم وعن هذه المنح الدراسية، وهو بكل تأكيد ما كان له مردود سيء وسلبي على الطلبة في قطاع غزة. وبكل تأكيد لا يمكننا حصر تأثير هذا الحصار على مناحي الحياة المختلفة في غزة. غزة عانت وتعاني وستبقى تعاني من هذا الحصار حتى الانتهاء من هذا الاحتلال. نعم لإنهاء الحصار الظالم على غزة، نعم لإنهاء الحصار الظالم على كوبا، الحرية لفلسطين، الحرية لشعوب العالم. كل الشكر لمنظمي هذا المؤتمر AMED، People Forums، التحالف الكوبي، التحالف الديني الأسود للإسلام للتضامن مع كوبا وفلسطين. شكرا لكم.
The Cuban Revolution is a culmination of the struggles for national independence and social justice embodied in the indigenous resistance to Spanish colonization, in African rebellions against slavery, reaching a crescendo on October 10, 1868, when Carlos Manuel de Cespedes launched the First War for Independence, carried forward and deepened by Jose Marti and Antonio Maceo, and revived periodically throughout the 20th century when Cuba languished under U.S. hegemony. The Cuban Revolution is therefore the crystallization and consummation of the historical aspirations of the Cuban people, manifested time and time again in their reaffirmation and determination to defend, strengthen, and perfect their revolutionary project. However, the empire has never accepted the verdict of the Cuban people. It has waged an unceasing economic war and campaign of destabilization aimed at restoring U.S. imperialism's domination and tutelage. Various reactionary forces in league with U.S. imperialism deliberately engage in various ways to discredit the Cuban Revolution and create a climate of disinformation and confusion to justify further aggression against the island nation. However, overwhelmingly, the international community and the world solidarity movement with Cuba is united in rejecting Washington's economic war and destabilization campaign. For example, the U.S. State Department failed miserably in pressuring countries in the Americas and across the world to join its ignominious and scurrilous attacks and maneuvers against Cuba in the wake of the events of July the 11th of 2021. The latest debacle at the Summit of the Americas not only underscored its failure to isolate Cuba, but the estrangement of Washington from the region, as many countries either stayed away in protest against Cuba's exclusion or sent lower-level delegations, with one delegate after another calling for an end to U.S. hostilities against the heroic island nation. The current outpouring of support and solidarity for Cuba across the globe in the wake of the disastrous fire at the Matanzas oil storage facility has demonstrated not only the profound respect that the world holds for Cuba, but the outright vicious cynicism of the United States and its isolation. Since the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1959, the U.S. has waged an unceasing assault, both military and economic, against the Cuban people, organizing an invasion, assassinations, terrorist attacks against civilians, and systematic economic sabotage. Many of these acts were directly launched and or planned in the United States. These acts of terror against Cuba include the 1976 bombing of a civilian Cuban airliner that claimed the lives of 73 people, and a spate of hotel bombings in 1997. As a point of fact, 3,478 Cubans have been killed and more than 2,000 injured because of these terrorist acts. The object of the U.S. strategy is clear. It is the negation and extinguishment of Cuba's right to self-determination, sovereignty, and independence. In short, to reimpose U.S. domination, hegemony, and tutelage. The malign instrument towards this goal is to starve the Cuban people into submission by suffocating the economy. But what is it that Washington seeks to destroy? What is it that they fear so much? What is the society that U.S. government is so zealously committed to undermining? Cuba is a society where universal education and healthcare, housing and food, and access to culture are fundamental rights. And the state, within its limited resources, does its utmost to transform these aspirations into reality. Indeed, in Cuba, there are no homeless children roaming the streets, eking out an existence in a dog-eat-dog society where everyone fends for themselves, so characteristics and defining a profit-driven and capital-centered society. This commitment is affirmed and ratified by and through Cuba's system of popular power, which provides consequential, concrete, and meaningful input into decision-making by the citizenry. Through mass participation and consultation, these historical aspirations are expressed in a political consensus to defend, strengthen, and perfect the revolutionary project. Cuba is the country that, despite worldwide attacks on fundamental human rights, has created a final draft of a new family code that will be voted on in a referendum on September 25, 2022. The code is guided by Jose Marti's dictum, with all and for the good of all, guaranteeing respect for family diversity and defending the rights of all. Cuba is one of the most prescient and powerful voices in both word and deed as humanity faces an ecological catastrophe, developing a 100-year plan to address the ravages of climate change by 2100. Indeed, in 2006, the World Wildlife Fund designated Cuba as the only country with sustainable development. Besieged by the empire, the heroic island has made invaluable contributions to the well-being of the world's nations and peoples, having established an unparalleled legacy of internationalism and humanitarianism. More than 400,000 Cuban medical personnel have served in 164 countries fighting disease. It is Internationalist Cuba which has selflessly dispatched tens of thousands of medical personnel to dozens of countries across the world to fight disease, be it Ebola or COVID-19. More than 2,000 Cubans gave their lives in the struggles to liberate Africa from the scourge of colonialism and the racist apartheid South African state. As Nelson Mandela emphasized, and I quote, "The Cuban people hold a special place in the hearts of the peoples of Africa. The Cuban internationalists have made a contribution to African independence, freedom, and justice unparalleled for its principled and selfless character." End of quote. Cuba has steadfastly stood with the Palestinian people in their struggle for freedom and independence and nationhood, providing training and education for Palestinian students and activists, while actively defending the Palestinian cause in numerous international forums. What Cuba has done nationally and internationally is no small feat. Its impressive achievements have occurred amid an all-sided brutal aggression by Washington. There is a growing recognition that Cuba's example needs to be globalized. Cuba demonstrates that relations amongst the world's nations and peoples do not have to be determined by self-interest and the pursuit of power and wealth. Cuba is an inspirational example that it is possible to build relations based on genuine human solidarity. Cuba has refuted and continues to refute the colonialist mentality and practice of foisting on independent countries and colonized peoples imperial arrangements and dictates that they resoundingly reject. The Cuban Revolution has refused to renounce its right to self-determination, independence, and sovereignty. Across Cuba, a frequent slogan emblazoned on billboards is, and I quote, "Each day in the world, 300 million children sleep in the streets. Not one is Cuban," end of quote. Perhaps in these uncertain times, in the face of immense challenges and dangers for humanity, this best sums up what Cuba represents and strives to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Gaza in this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Isaac. We're going to just hear one message from Rana Shubair in Gaza. And actually, all the bios, we're not reading bios because they're very long, but you can actually see them on the websites. So read them. They will always be there. You can check them out. Go check their work. So we will hear from Rana Shubair next. Go ahead.
Killing civilians. It targets infrastructure. Israel continues to bomb Gaza indiscriminately, killing civilians. It targets infrastructure, schools, houses, mosques, cars, and even animals. It wages a large-scale aggression against a besieged population, thereby violating all international humanitarian laws and conventions. The airtight blockade has been suffocating Gaza for 16 years now. Crossings are closed at the will of the Israeli occupation. The only commercial crossing in Rafah, which Israel allows passing of goods through, was closed before this attack. This led to extreme shortage in electricity, which disrupted the work of hospitals and aggravated the already bad situation which the people live under. With extreme heat, people have no source of ventilation. Water sources are dependent on the availability of electricity, which is needed to operate generators. The shortage in water, electricity, and basic goods during the attack was meant to make the people live in despair. As a mother, my children and their generation has witnessed all 5 major aggressions over Gaza and other in-between attacks. Around 80% of children suffer from PTSD. They lack the basic human rights every child must have. Their playgrounds aren't safe, their schools aren't safe, and their homes aren't safe. They've seen parents.
Greetings to
Thank you so much, Rana Shubair, and we will have her in the future longer. But check out her website. Actually, she has 2 books and she has a lot of activities online. Next is we are very happy to present Claudia de la Cruz, who's the executive director of the People's Forum, who we had the pleasure to meet through the Poor People's Campaign about 3 years ago. So, and you're going to be introducing yourself, right? So, yes, please.
How's everyone doing? You look good. Hi, Gail. Hi, Dr. Rabab. It's so good to be with my sister comrades. It's so good to be with you all. As Dr. Rabab mentioned, my name is Claudia de la Cruz, and I'm part of the collective of the People's Forum. I wanted to start with chant, because I actually heard your opening. I was in the back of a car like, oh, Dr. Rabab is on point all the time. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. Oh my God, I know it's 7:30 at this point, 7:45, I don't know. You ready? You ready? Yeah. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. All right, hopefully you will still have some energy at 9 p.m., but actually, I heard a lot of what Dr. Rabab mentioned, and obviously the comrade that spoke before me spoke a lot about Cuba. And so I just wanted to share that, entertain me for a second. When I was 17 years old, I got a book. And that book was called My People Shall Live. Anyone, if you haven't heard about that book, write it down. My People Shall Live. And it was written by Layla Khaled. And if you don't know who she is, Google her. And Layla Khaled, you know, Palestinian freedom fighter, is writing. And she had the ability to have a global analysis of the situation while writing in Palestine. And she was writing about the Cuban Revolution, but she was also writing about the dictatorship in the Dominican Republic. I'm Dominican. And I was like, how the hell does this woman, all the way on the other side of the world, know to speak about the struggle in the Dominican Republic and speak about the need to be able to know and support the resistance struggle in the Dominican Republic? That's 1. 17. When I was 17, I also went for the first time to Cuba. And I was shocked to see that there was a statue of Máximo Gómez, Dominican national hero, in the Malecón, facing towards the sea. Now, if you know anything, Cubans will tell you when you land and you ask about statues, that if you have a statue that's facing the sea, that means that that person died as a national hero. When I went and I saw the flag and I saw Máximo Gómez, I said, why is he like a national hero of Cuba? He's Dominican, and the Dominican flag is there because I know my flag. The comrades from the UJC, the youth, the Communist League, said to me, you don't know the story? I was like, nah, I don't, and I'm Dominican. I should know this. And they said, well, the story is that Máximo Gómez came to Cuba and fought the Spanish war against the Spaniards, the colonial forces, and taught José Martí how to use a machete. I was like, how did I not know this? So at 17, a whole new world opened up for me. And the concept of international solidarity was being synced into my being. I had read the book from Layla Khaled. I'd gone to protest around the issue of Palestine. I'd gone to Cuba. I met the Cuban people, which, by the way, it's very much a lie. Fidel Castro never ate a child. Those were the lies of anti-communist rhetoric that I was growing up in, which continue if you turn on Telemundo or Univision, they're still there. I was able to see solidarity at first hand. There were a lot of yellow buses all over Havana that said, IFCO passes for peace. There were Chinese, actually, buses driving people around. A lot of Russian remnants, too. The people of Cuba, very similarly to the people of Palestine, have been able to survive because they've resisted. And they've resisted the same enemy. The colonial forces, the imperialist forces, the United States, and the illegal occupation of Israel to Palestine. Those two have been also the ones standing against the lifting of the blockade at the UN. I had a good teacher that once told me, you're not only you, you're also the person who you hang around with. There's a lot of people the US hangs out with that are not good for humanity. Israel is one of them. And so when we're talking about solidarity is also knowing who our enemy is so that we're able to identify who our friends are. The United States, under Joe Biden, right? Because everybody was like, oh, Trump is the bad guy. Let's get rid of Trump. All right, let's build an anti-Trump coalition and forget about the rebellions of 2020 and forget about the fact that we're living the deepest economic crisis and forget about the fact that people are being displaced during COVID. Let's forget about all of that, but let's build a coalition against Trump because Biden's about to change this shit. That didn't happen. 2022, Joe Biden and the Democratic Party continue to hold 243 articles in sanctioning of Cuba. Cuban people who could have lived because, I don't know, they needed oxygen Something as simple as that, oxygen, during a surgery have died. When we're talking about the 60-somewhat years of blockade to Cuba, we're talking about over $200 billion. Over $200 billion. Now think about what you could buy in terms of medicine, what you could buy in terms of advancing agriculture, what you could do around employment, what you can do about infrastructure. Cuba has had to pay the price that Haiti paid in 1804 for becoming a free nation. It has given the world not only the example, but the inspiration that it is possible to live outside, divorced from capitalist systems. And that's why the United States, with its little crony called Israel, would not allow for Gaza, for Palestine, to get to that point. Will not allow for any other nation. I mean, what was it, Ted Cruz, what he said? Was it Cruz, or it was one of these crazy senators that was the other day on, I mean, it came out, I'm sorry, I can't remember right now, but I spent a whole lot of time in traffic. But one of them actually stood up and said, we will not allow any more socialist nations in this continent. I mean, you could Google it. It probably is on Twitter, because that's where I saw it. And he was talking about Cuba, Venezuela. He was talking about progressive governments that have not yet called themselves socialist, like the government in Honduras. He was talking about the coup that's awaiting to happen in Peru. We will not allow. That takes a lot of audacity for a senator to say, for the public to see. And the reason they won't allow it is because allowing it will mean that people will know que sí se puede, that it is possible to dream in a way that divorces us from the shackles of imperialism, of colonialism, of capitalism, and every exploitive system that there is. Cuba. The Cuban Revolution of 1959 gave hope to many. And I always compare it to the rebellion and the first Black proletariat revolution in this continent, which is the Haitian Revolution. The Cuban Revolution means to us, the slaves of capitalism, what the Haitian Revolution meant to Black poor people all over the world who were enslaved. If we do not defend that revolution, we are okay with being slaves. If we don't defend that revolution, we are okay with being slaves. You like me preaching, Gail? I know. When we talk about Gaza, I mean, just yesterday, there was a bombing in Gaza. At least 15 children were killed. They were murdered, assassinated, killed by an immoral occupying force that receives financing, equipment, all sorts of things from the enemies of the world, because they are the enemies of the world. That's the U.S. government, state, and all its institutions. So when we're talking about Palestine and we're talking about Gaza, we're talking about sisters and brothers, comrades, our people, our kin, who are under the same threat and attack than the people in the hood of New York City. We have one of the biggest military forces, which is the NYPD. And they exchange training. I mean, if you talk about the NYPD in New York City, it has more funding than a lot of military across the world. That's how heavily militarized we are in New York City alone. So when we're talking about our people, Adam isn't our people. You know who Adam is, right? I hope y'all know, because that's an enemy of the state, enemy of the people, friend of a state. Exactly. And so we need to understand who our enemies are. The local ones, the national ones, and the international ones, because they all work together. I'll share with you another anecdote before I leave or get off the stage. I won't leave, I'll get off the stage. When I was 18 years old and I had a whole bunch of, because that's the reality of my life, I was being mentored by some Puerto Rican men who were socialist, liberation theologians, young Lord, former members. They had a bad mala maña. Mala maña, I don't know how to translate that, but they had like a bad thing to do every morning, which was to call me very early in the morning. I'm in high school. And these people will call, like, before you didn't have a cell phone, so they called your direct line. And my mom would, like, they're calling you again, all pissed off because she got woken up, right? And I get the phone and they'd say, how many newspapers have you read? I'm like, I just woke up. But how many newspapers have you read? I just woke up, I told you. Go downstairs and get 5 newspapers. Most of the times I didn't do it, but that would be the direction, right? Go downstairs, and it would always end with the people who are there to make sure that your life and the life of the generations to come is not guaranteed. They woke up at 4 a.m. and they've already done planned 30 years ahead. Dr. Verb said, of course. What does that mean to movement today when we're talking about solidarity and we're talking about movement building? We gotta wake up, and I don't mean like woke, I mean wake up, for real. Get up the bed. Get up and go. Organize. Educate ourselves. Educate the people around us. Move the people around us. Take action. Transform. The word solidarity is not a word. It's a verb. It's something we do every day and something that we commit our very existence to. That's what I learned. That's what I've learned with Palestine. That's what I've learned with Cuba. That's what I've learned with Puerto Rico, which is still a colony of the United States. People continue to resist because their very lives are at stake. Our lives are at stake for as long as our people in Palestine, in Puerto Rico, in Cuba, in Venezuela are not allowed to live. I don't know if you've heard about the Let Cuba Live campaign. If you haven't, check it out. Let Cuba Live. Many organizations, many individuals have logged on to demand from the Joe Biden administration to lift the blockade on Cuba. And if you're not gonna lift the blockade, do the minimal, bro. And it's not about picking up the phone and saying, I'm sorry, we're gonna send, tell you, advise you on this and that, when you have a fire blasting that's killing people. China came to the rescue, just so we keep our enemies aligned and our friends aligned too. China came to the rescue. Venezuela came to the rescue. Mexico. Because you know your friends not by what they say, but by what they do, right? So the only thing that the most powerful and most wealthy nation in the world that has extracted so much from many countries, including Cuba, was able to do was call and say, I will offer you some technical advice. When the house is burning? Really? And so the Let Cuba Live campaign is saying, if you won't lift the blockade that has been killing people, a criminal, illegal, immoral blockade that most of the world is against anyway, except for you and your cronies, if you won't do that, at least lift the 243 articles of sanctioning that were placed under Trump, if you're that different. So we're demanding that. So if you haven't signed on to it, sign on to the petition, share it with people. Many of us, including IFCO, Pastors for Peace, have been working together. IFCO, Code Pink, Puentes de Amor, the People's Forum, to build a campaign that also goes beyond the petitioning, which is being able to bring actual material aid, bring medical supplies, which Cuba has already a shortage of because of the blockade. So again, please visit the Let Cuba Live website. The solidarity, this is my favorite quote, and I'll end with this. My favorite quote from Cuba, and it was a quote from Che, and Fidel used it a lot as well, was, solidarity is the tenderness of the people. Solidarity is the tenderness of the people. Let us allow ourselves for the systems of oppression not to take that tenderness away from us. Let us allow ourselves to reclaim some of the humanity and the dignity and the connectedness that was there before capitalism. We can't imagine a world without capitalism and imperialism. We can't imagine a world with a new type of system in the United States. And the biggest act of solidarity for those of us who live here in the belly of the beast is to create a revolution here and now. A revolution that would be a working class people's revolution that will advance solidarity, collaboration, respect. If we don't do that, the United States will continue to do what it's always done: extract and kill our people. And we can't allow for that to happen. Thank you.
You need to come here. Thank you so much. Pastor Claudia. Liberation theologist. And now we're going to be watching more recordings from Gaza. Next on our list actually is, we heard Rana Ansam, who's a student, and then we're going to have Saad Ziadeh and Raja, and then we will go back to our sister comrade, Gail. Okay, so yes, please go ahead. You can take a break.
All the free people of the world, and to every person whose heart beats with humanity. Ansam al-Masri, a Palestinian identity, Gaza as my place of birth, and Jaffa as my hometown. A third-year university student studying English language and literature. In this humble video, I will summarize the tragedy and suffering that we experienced during the past 3 days of the Israeli aggression against our Gaza. Here is Gaza, where the war constant robbed us of our childhood and youth. Successive wars. Another one started 3 days ago, and we don't know if it will be the last one after the devastation it left behind. Voice here, screaming, weeping, wailing, woes, screams of people who died, mother who lost children, brother who lost a companion, widowed wives, orphaned children, whole family buried. Homes built with love over the years of living, gone in the blink of an eye. Dwelling shattered dreams and wishes. The mother, instead of marrying her son to his bride, is married off as a bride to the last resort. The night is harsh. The second is about a decade. The woes are increasing. The murderers are constantly increasing. Murderers are not just numbers. Each of them has a story told and written in blood. Just in Gaza, children were deprived of their childhood. Young people had their future taken from them by force. Here, in the land of peace, where there's no peace, you don't know where to find a safe bed to sleep in. You doubt whether the next bombardment will be upon us. The enemy war plans flying frighteningly over the course of time and terror breaks the hearts of our children. Imagine that you are in a dark room where you don't see anything, and a group of predators launched at you, sitting, and you don't know how to escape, as if you are the next target. This is exactly what we feel every night during the Israelis' wars against the Gaza Strip. During the last 3 days, it was announced that no one will survive. No one will survive the massacres of the Zionists, and whoever will survive from us will be a coincidence. Imagine that you are to press any button in your home to turn it on. Just by pressing this button, but from the Israeli devices, innocent souls are purified and departed from the whole world. Is this what you call it peace? Is this what you call it self-defense, we are living under a terrorist Israeli occupation, and that Israeli occupation must be held accountable for its unjustified brutality and barbarity that targeted the Gaza Strip during the past 3 days. The aggression is over, but the pain has not ended, and our hearts are still bleeding. Here is Gaza, where the war constant robbed us of our childhood and youth.
الرفاق والرفيقات في حملة رفع الحصار عن غزة وكوبا، تحية لكم من أرض غزة البطولة وغزة المحاصرة. نحييكم ونحيي جهودكم في هذه الحملة من أجل رفع الظلم وفك الحصار عن غزة وكوبا، حيث نحن وكوبا نعاني من نفس الأدوات ومن نفس الظلم ومن نفس السياسات التي تحرمنا من أبسط حقوقنا في العيش الكريم. ذلك لأن الشعب
just like, and I'll go like this, I'll translate and then you can continue. Yeah, because I think they just didn't get the chance to do it. So I'll start from the beginning. Okay, so this is Saad Ziyadeh. This is Saad Ziyadeh. Saad Ziyadeh is the director of the Union of Agricultural Work Committees in Gaza, which is the farmers' union, which has been actually declared as a criminal terrorist organization by the Israeli state in Gaza. There were 6 human rights organizations in May that Israel declared illegal and terrorist and criminal, and it's been penalizing them. Saad is in Gaza. There are 5 other organizations in the West Bank, and Israel, actually, we discovered that they're also spying on them through the NSO, Pegasus the software, that was also spying on the families of the 43 disappeared students in Mexico, the human rights workers, one of the friends of Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi critic who was chopped up to pieces by His Highness Mohammed bin Salman in the Saudi embassy in Turkey and so on. Anyway, they're spying on them. So he's one of the organizers in Gaza, and he's speaking to us. So I'm going to translate. I'll just go like this. I'll translate, and then you can continue. Okay.
عن غزة وكوبا، حيث نحن وكوبا نعاني من نفس الأدوات ومن نفس الظلم ومن نفس.
I'm here to express solidarity with Cuba and Gaza and lifting the siege of Cuba and Gaza, since we are also facing the same repression and the same difficulties.
التي تحرمنا من أبسط حقوقنا في العيش الكريم، ذلك لأن الشعب الكوبي والشعب الفلسطيني وخاصة في قطاع غزة يرفض الذل والمهان.
And that is because the Cuban we are being repressed and we are being attacked because both the Cuban people and the Palestinian people, including the people in Gaza, are refusing to be subjugated and refusing to be crushed.
عن 15 عاما شددت القوات الإسرائيلية، قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي، حصارها على قطاع غزة، الحصار الذي أساسا كان موجود على قطاع غزة، ولكن قبل ما يقارب 15 عاما تم تشديد هذا الحصار على قطاع غزة، حيث يمنع سكان قطاع غزة من التنقل.
And we're talking now about 15 years of blockade of Gaza, but actually there was a blockade before, and now it is continuing and being strengthened, and now he's going to talk about the various ways the blockade. Go ahead. Yeah.
حقوقهم في العيش الكريم وفي الحياة وفي الحرية. هذا الحصار ترافق مع العديد من أنواع الظلم والبطش والتدمير، حيث يعاني سكان قطاع غزة من الفقر الشديد ومن البطالة المرتفعة. فآخر الإحصائيات والأرقام تقول بأنه ما يزيد عن 60% من سكان قطاع غزة يعانون من انعدام الأمن الغذائي، وأن نسبة البطالة في قطاع غزة تجاوزت 45% بين من يستطيعون العمل، وهذه أرقام جد خطيرة وتعكس على الأقل حقيقة الواقع في قطاع غزة.
And he's talking about how the blockade has deprived people from dignity, from freedom, from living a good life. People in Gaza suffer from poverty and suffer from unemployment. over 60% of people in Gaza actually suffer food insecurity, and over 60% of the people suffer food insecurity, and over 45% suffer from unemployment.
المزارعين والصيادين في قطاع غزة عملت قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي على مدار سنوات الحصار على تدمير كل البنية التحتية الخاصة بالقطاع الزراعي، فجرفت ودمرت الأشجار والثمار. وهناك يعني من يقول بأنه معظم الأراضي الزراعية في قطاع غزة تم تجريفها أكثر من مرة، ورغم عمليات إعادة تأهيل هذا القطاع إلا أن الاحتلال الإسرائيلي لا زال مصرا ومستمرا في عمليات التجريف واقتلاع الأشجار وطرد المزارعين من أراضيهم. هذا الواقع.
And he's now talking about the ways Israel has specifically targeted the agricultural sector, in the sense that they have attacked, they have raised trees, they have prevented crops from growing, they have several times, they continue attacking again, and this makes it's actually really impossible, despite the fact that Gaza farmers are trying, it's very difficult to rehabilitate the agricultural economy in Gaza, because Israel continues to uproot trees and continues to destroy crops again and again.
في نفس الوقت ما يعانيه الصيادين في قطاع غزة، حيث أن قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي تلاحقهم على مدار الساعة من خلال إطلاق النيران والقذائف على مراكبهم، فرض الحصار البحري، مصادرة المراكب، مما أدى إلى سقوط عشرات الضحايا ما بين شهيد ومصاب، علاوة على المعتقلين. هذا الواقع الذي تفرضه قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بهدف إبعادنا عن مصادر رزقنا ومصادرنا الطبيعية.
And now Saad is talking about the fishermen in Gaza, how Israel is also destroying the fisher. Gaza is very well known for seafood in Palestine. It's like very famous. You want to eat good seafood, you go to Gaza. I'm ad-libbing, right? It's really one of the best places. And I can tell you personal experiences if you'd like, okay? I love to cook and I love to eat. Okay, so he's saying that Israeli occupation has continued again and again to attack that. They fire on the fishermen. They blockade the sea. And actually, a lot of the times, if you know, there is a lot of negotiations about, is it 3 miles, is it 6 miles? And Israel agrees to a certain, and then they actually push back and they fire. And people don't pay attention and they continue doing it. They confiscate the boats of the fishermen who are going out. There have been tens of martyrs and injured as a result of this. So they are actually depriving people of their livelihood, not only blockading them and bombing them.
إبقائنا في قطاع غزة معتمدين اعتمادا كليا على الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بأن نكون سوقا الاستهلاكية وفي ذات الوقت مصدرا للعمالة في داخل الكيان المحتل. نحن نرى أنه من الضروري أن يكون هناك تضامنا عالميا من كافة الأحرار والضغط على الحكومات في كل البلدان من أجل الضغط على حكومة الاحتلال من أجل رفع الحصار عن قطاع غزة، وفي ذات الوقت أن تعمل هذه الشبكات والتحالفات من خلال دولها وفي كل المناطق التي تتواجد فيها من أجل أن يكون هناك تضامن واسع وجهد وفعاليات مشتركة تسلط الضوء على ما يجري في فلسطين وخاصة في قطاع غزة وعلى ما يجري في كوبا. نحن يجب أن نستند.
And he's saying also one of the things that make it very difficult is that we are totally reliant on the Israeli economy. So this is why Israel once in a while would give permits to workers to work inside Israel, and we can talk about that if you want in the Q&A about the conditions of work inside Israel, what they mean and so on. So he's saying that in short, we are calling for solidarity, broad solidarity from all free people around the world to pressure their governments so they can pressure and hold Israeli government accountable, bring as broad as possible, both with Gaza and with Cuba.
نضالنا إلى حقوقنا الأساسية كشعب يرزق تحت الاحتلال وله حقوق أساسية أقلها حق تقرير المصير في أرضه المستلبة والمغتصبة من قبل الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. نحن نتمنى لجهودكم النجاح وأن تتواصل مثل هذه الحملات من أجل إنهاء المعاناة في فلسطين وفي كل المناطق التي يعاني شعوبها من الظلم ومن سياسات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي والاحتلال الأمريكي بشتى أنواعه.
And he is saying that this is really important to pressure and build the broadest solidarity to enable people to actually get rid of occupation and exercise the right to self-determination on their land. And we wish you the success in all this, and we would like to see more of these campaigns going on to stop the suffering of the people and support the people under Israeli occupation and American occupation and support their freedom. I think it's almost finished, yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Raja. I am a Palestinian and my original town is Hamama. My specialty is English education and I'm studying at Al-Aqsa University. Seeing my country free is my wish once I realized what the word homeland means. Being a Palestinian comes with a heavy price. If you are a Palestinian, you will have to endure the loss of the people you love the most with strength and patience. For the last 3 days in a row, Israeli occupation airstrikes have claimed the lives of many Palestinian civilians. The Ministry of Health in Gaza has reported that 44 persons were murdered, including 15 children, and 360 others were injured due to the current Israeli aggression on Gaza. The Israeli media justifies targeting Gaza by saying that Israel is just defending itself. But in fact, most of Gaza's victims were classified as children and women. Ala Qaddoum, a 5-year-old Palestinian child, was one of these victims. According to the Ministry of Public Work and Housing, over 17 houses were totally destroyed due to the current Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip. I always wonder if what happened with the Palestinians would happen with other peoples. Will it be met with silence? Of course no. But when it comes to the Palestinians, no one cares.
Thank you for the translation and the captioning. And next we are going to be hearing from amazing struggler and one of the free people around the world, Gail Walker, the executive director of IFCO, Pastors for Peace, who had just come back from Cuba leading a caravan. And I'm going to let you speak because if I continue talking about you, I will never finish.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so sweet. Well, as always, it's an honor to share any kind of space with Professor Rabab. You are amazing, wonderful. We could be here all day talking about the, who was it that said, I don't know how you continue to do this. It was like Claudia, just day in and, no, Leanne was saying, and she was so right. It's so, how do you do this? But you are a tremendous example, and just thank you for being you and being the teacher that you are. And Claudia, right? I mean, come on, can we give our sister a little hand? She's always spot on, and so it's an honor for me to be. I'm not going to talk real long because I'm just here learning and absorbing. Yes, I just came back from Cuba, and we love Cuba. It was wonderful to be able to be there with almost 90 people from 20 some odd different states. Is that right, Angie? I'm looking at Angie who's going to, 25 different states. God, I was right, Shelley. Thank you. We got some caravanistas in the house. Tremendous, wonderful experience. But it's always, I think, important for us to figure out how is it that we make links with struggles. And there were a lot of different organizations doing work around health and education, housing, and seeing what Cuba's approach is. I always said if there was a question about some of these things, you know what? Cuba has an app for that. That was me trying to get how I did that? Okay. Angie looks at me all the time. She's just really not that funny. But anyway, Cuba has an approach for these different things that are a tremendous example And so that's why we continue to go and we continue to lift up Cuba. But, you know, making the links between Cuba and Palestine, it's not difficult, unfortunately, to do so. I went to Palestine for the first time, maybe about 25 years ago. And I kept hearing, you know, there's a, going to Palestine is like South Africa. And I'd never been to South Africa. I only knew what I knew about apartheid, and I didn't quite get it until I was there. And I saw the way that, first of all, flying into Tel Aviv, right? And so on the Israeli side, and you're going past water fountains and green lawns and what do you call those? Golf course, thank you. Golf courses, we were talking about them. But we're seeing all of this rich, you know, fertile land. And as you continue to go closer and closer, and you get closer to Palestine and to the border, it's amazing. Arid, Arab land, nothing green, no water, just, you know, broken down housing. I mean, it's like you're literally on the other side of the proverbial tracks. And getting to the border, seeing the ways in which people were just disrespected is not even the right word. Dehumanizing treatment of my elders, and these are my elders, right? We're taught you don't talk to your elders that way. You don't treat your grandma the way that these young Israeli soldiers were treating the just people who were trying to just cross the border. And of course, I went on, and we learned things that I could go on all day and talking about just how incredibly transformative, and we use that same word when we've talked about Cuba, this trip to Palestine was for me. Some of you have heard this story, but it's always something that really resonates for me, is that we were visiting with some Palestinian family, mother, father, 3 children, and who would come down from, this was in, I want to say it was in Jenin. I wish I could remember exactly where, but they had come down from the mountains where their home was. Hebron, you're right, that's exactly where it was. And they were, you know, for the winter, taking care of the family. But there was a little girl, maybe about 3 or 4 years old, who was deathly afraid of me. Now, I'm the only Black woman in the room, right? And I'm like, oh, all right, you know, sometimes these things happen. But I stayed and I was learning things. And the father says to me eventually, you may be wondering why my daughter is so cowering, you know, towards you. And I'm like, yeah, kind of. And he says that she is equating you with the African workers that the Israelis used to displace Palestinians from their homes. And it was so, like, mind-blowing to me and heart-wrenching. And we left that house, and I was in a ball of tears, because I thought, this little child has already been taught hatred at such a young age. And now, on top of what the, you know, Israeli authorities have been doing to her people and her land, she's being taught racism at this young age. And it was just another example of why we need to do this work and tell these stories, and why there's such a link between what we do in Cuba and what we do in Palestine, because the blockade is immoral, it's criminal, it's unjust, it's bullshit, and we need to end it. And so I'm so grateful for all the work that so many of folk do. And Professor Verb, you are always this shining example of why it is we have to get up every day and fight this fight. So those of us who've been to Cuba and seen and recognized all of what Cuba has to offer, let's expand ourselves. Reading is fundamental, a friend told me recently. So we need to read, we need to visit, we need to go and see Palestine for ourselves, because, you know, that's an important piece of the work. And not be afraid of the imperialist powers, the colonial powers that will try to keep us separated, recognizing that, as Claudia so rightly said, the bond between these imperial powers We can't allow that to stand without pushing back and speaking out against the injustice that is the blockade. So still got a raspy voice from that Cuba trip, but we're ready to continue to stand in solidarity with our Palestinian friends and family. And thank you for just doing the work that you continue to do. And I think, Angie, looks like we got some work to do. Palestine's in the forward mirror here. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Oh, I know that Gail has so much more to say, but she was trying to cut it short because we are going to hear last from Professor Haidar Eid, who teaches in Gaza, who also sent us a message, and then we're going to open it up to have conversations, discussions, commentary with everybody here, because at 9 o'clock the People's Forum closes, so we are limited in time, but this is just the beginning. So let's hear from Professor Eid, and then open it up for discussion. And also maybe, David, you can look at if there are questions online that you can share with us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Haidar Eid, and I'm addressing you from besieged Gaza, occupied Palestine. And I would like to start off by thanking AMED and the People's Forum for organizing this people-to-people solidarity event. As the Gaza blockade is entering its 15th year, I think we need to make sense of the present moment. It is of utmost importance for us here in Gaza, Palestine, to place this medieval siege imposed by apartheid Israel within a particular colonial context. In other words, being allowed by the American administration back in 2006 to head for the polling stations in order to vote for our representatives in the Legislative Council elections, we Palestinians of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank unfortunately, we made the wrong choice. And for that, we had to be severely punished by the Americans and the Israelis and reactionary Arab regimes. Voting against the will of the Americans was the crime that led to where we are right now, in an unprecedented, deadly blockade that has transformed the Gaza Strip, the coastal enclave, into what mainstream human rights organizations, the likes of Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, even Israeli mainstream human organization Beit Salim, call the largest open-air prison on earth. In a nutshell, we are being punished for acts for which we bear no responsibility whatsoever. The closure, therefore, is a form of collective punishment. 2.4 million people live without a secure supply of water, food, electricity, medicines, with almost half of us being children under the age of 15, in clear violation of Israel's obligations under international humanitarian law embodied in the Geneva Conventions. And as if 15 years of blockade, interrupted by 4 genocidal wars, is not enough. Never before has a population been denied the basic requirements for survival as a deliberate policy of colonization, occupation, and apartheid. But hey, this is what Israel is doing to us today. Why is this allowed to happen in the 21st century? Well, simply because we are not, as one European journalist said it when he was commenting on on the events in Ukraine. We are not, and I'm quoting him, relatively civilized. We are not European people with blue eyes and blonde hair, unquote. My argument, in fact, has always been that apartheid Israel has managed successfully, I would say, to transform the Gaza Strip into a concentration and death camp at the same time. Both concentration and death camp, where large numbers of people are detained and in which large numbers of prisoners are systematically killed under the watchful eye of either an indifferent international community or its full complicity and support. We, in other words, are the unneeded surplus population. Israel's decision to redeploy its troops around the densely populated coastal strip in 2005 and then impose an unprecedented medieval siege for the last 15 years, one that has shattered all spheres of life and interrupted, as I said, by 4 massive attacks that have killed more than 4,000 civilians, including women and children, does not seem to be enough for the international community to take action. Unfortunately. And this has been going on for the last 15 years. Now, this is why at the end of last year, Israel announced the completion of a 65-kilometer sensor-equipped underground wall around Gaza, which includes hundreds of cameras, radar, and other sensors, transforming Gaza into a concentration camp, a death camp indeed. Being an openly apartheid state, Israel has managed to demonize the people of Gaza simply because we are not born to Jewish mothers. And therefore, we do not have the right to be treated as full human beings. Only those with white skin and or born to Jewish families can have that right in historic Palestine. The conclusion we have reached in Gaza is that Israel is intent on destroying Gaza altogether, encouraged by the official world apathy to the suffering of the Palestinians in general and those who live in Gaza in particular. The destruction of Gaza will happen. Definitely, we can see it happening. And then the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin's dream will come to true, and we will disappear into the Mediterranean Sea. The late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin wished that one day he would wake up and find out that all Gazans have drowned into the Mediterranean Sea. But we are resisting with the support coming from the likes of our Cuban comrades and conscientious, freedom-loving people. We will see the end of the last remaining apartheid system on earth. Long live the memory of Comrade Fidel Castro. Long live the memory of Comrade Che Guevara. And long live the memory of all Palestinian martyrs. Long live Cuban-Palestinian solidarity and friendship. Thank you.
That was hot. Yes, yes. This is amazing. And Dr. Eid, for people who do not know, actually studied in South Africa, and he's a South African citizen. But he is also remains in Gaza, writes in Gaza, responds all the time whenever anybody asks him. So, and he teaches. He's a professor, so he teaches a lot. A lot of the students you hear, a lot of them are his students. So now we're going to open it up for comments, conversation, questions. No long speeches, please, because we don't have a lot of time, and because we are going to be able to have more discussions of this sort. So just bear with us. Let's all cooperate with each other. So first I'm going to call on our panelists to, if you have anything to respond to, comment on, or something. If you don't, you can always jump in anyway. You have that privilege. I want to ask if the People's Forum staff would like to say something, and then open it up. And please do not keep thinking about what question you want to say, because next somebody's going to raise their hand and you lose your chance. So, okay, and then if we have questions online, or we don't have questions, or we only have a lot of love and solidarity and hearts, and which is lovely.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
I wanted to and I just said to you as we were, that was beautiful, that last intervention, but the whole issue of resistance, I mean, that's another area of direct link between Cuba solidarity, what our Cuban family has been forced to experience, but to demonstrate. And so we often say that resistance is contagious. And of course, our Palestinian family, the same. So I just wanted to throw that out as a theme or something for us to keep in mind, that the whole, the power of resistance is palpable, it's important, it's strong, relates to all of our movements, but particularly as we talk about Cuba and Palestine. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm going to actually make a little comment, and I see Audrey, but I'm going to, because you said that when you were 17 years old, you read Layla Khalid's book, My People Shall Live. And so you reminded me that of what we were shut down. We invited Layla Khalid to have a conversation with several comrades, Ronnie Kasriels from South Africa, Laura Whitehorn here, Seko Odinga, Rula Abu Daho. And then basically the Zionists were so upset by that because they did not want the discussion that Layla Khalid were raising. And I actually know like the passage that you've, because she was saying at that time that the 60s is not the decade of the revolutions, the 70s will be, and so on. And so we wanted her to be there, and they wanted to only construct her as a terrorist and have a problem for her being understood as a feminist icon and a symbol of resistance, standing up as a woman for herself, speaking up, and so on, and also kind of distilling the Palestinian voices of resistance. And it's really particularly these narratives, these colonial narratives of submission, subjugation, and defeat that they try to impose upon us. They try to say, nobody stands with the Palestinians. Same thing, nobody stands with Cuba. And this is why I actually think the People's Summit was really amazing in that sense, that like 1,000 people. And I'm sorry, you had no show, Biden. With all your might and all your power and all your money, no show. You had an empty hall. And there is people who are organizers from all over the Americas, from all over the world coming in, and actually people don't have money, don't have movements, came about and showed what a people's movement can be about. They want us to be subjugated. They want us to be defeated. They want us to kind of say, okay, we will surrender, right? And in the face of it, we have the steadfastness, we have the resistance, we have the resilience. We have people who are saying, okay, you can starve me, but at the end of the day, I'm going to continue speaking up, which is what we heard. And we also, and kind of like, I mean, for me, when I was in Cuba, I have to say, I actually asked them about political asylum. Can I just come and become, I mean, really, honestly, it's like, I've never felt freer in my life. I'm serious, I have to tell you that. And then some people will say, of course there is criticism. I said, yes, I know there is criticism, and I know there is all sorts of, and I think there is a huge debate in Cuba. But really, I have never felt more free. I've lived under occupation, I've been kind of traveling, and I've never felt like I can breathe. You know, it's just, it was, and people may think I'm very idealistic, that's fine. Okay, but I'm happy to have this debate about that, yes.
And I know, yeah. So I asked the same question, but not necessarily exile, because I was 17, I wasn't using that language. I said, can I just move here? And the comrade said, you need to go where you came from and build a revolution. When you do that, you could go anywhere. And the concept of, again, you have a responsibility that is beyond you. And that's what I got from that message. But to the question of resistance that I think is so important, you know, people who resist are deemed and labeled as terrorists by those who hold the narrative, hold the economic and political power to then build a narrative and massify that narrative. Cuba is currently in the list of states that sponsor terrorism. Who tells the United States that they're terrorists? Because that's what they do. They spread terrorism all over the world. Who tells Israel that is a terrorist state that kills babies? Who does that? What list do they belong? And who is putting them on that list? When we talk about resistance and we talk about the people who are resisting every day all around the world, we're talking about people who are utilizing whatever they have and whatever means and vehicles they have to continue to live. When we're talking about colonial powers and imperial powers, we're talking about people who have monopoly over violence. They have a monopoly on violence. They are the terrorists. They are the ones that are violent. They are the ones that have the economic, political power to bend people to whatever their will is. When people resist, we say, no, we won't bend. And that's reclaiming our dignity. So when we talk about Cuba, we're talking about a whole nation of people that is willing to die before they live under the boot of imperialism. When we're talking about Gaza and Palestine, is a whole bunch of people that are willing to die to be seen and known as human beings. We can, as people of consciousness, oppose that resistance. We must support it.
Thank you. And I'm going to call on, there is several people raise their hands, but I just wanted to say that the recent attack on Gaza actually underlines that. Because Israel actually provoked and did a preemptive attack, preemptive bombing in order to provoke an attack and actually deny people the right to even speak up. So this was one of the things. So I'm going to call on Audrey and then the brother here and then the gentleman. So Audrey, yeah.
I just wanted to really thank you.
Introduce yourself, who you are, and if you don't, I'll out you.
I'm not aware of, thank you, not aware of the connections. I remember I was in Cuba in 2015, and in the hotel there was a big Israeli delegation. And I mentioned it to folks, and nobody there had heard about BDS or anything really about Palestine. And it's really important for these struggles to be brought together. As I said, I was part of the original group of Free Gaza movement. We took boats to Gaza that got there 5 times and then were attacked by Israel. So my tendency is to say that we should come up with some kind of direct action at this point. Things are getting that serious that we need to get serious too, and to put more than that, to do more than just have meetings and rallies. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what we will do is we will take a few comments and then have one round, and then we will take another round. So the brother. Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening. Great. This is a great event. Oh, I'm Albert Scott from Brooklyn. Oh, there we go. Uh-oh. I definitely would like to hear just your insights in regards to, because the sister here stated about the working class and how we could activate that activism, just to hear your thoughts and strategies to help lift and remove the blockade, to help pressure the representative. What does that actually look like for that working class revolution, so to speak? It's different levels, but I'd definitely like to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, I thought you were waiting for an answer. Yeah, just to echo a little bit of what my friend here was saying. My name is Max Irwin. I'm a longtime worker, communist, frustrated revolutionary. I don't want to criticize you too badly, but I can't argue with anything that's been said tonight. But what frustrates me as an individual, as a human being, as a real revolutionary working class Marxist, is what's not being said. The connection between Cuba revolutionary gains and Gaza is clear to me. It's been clear to me. It's good that you're doing that. So my mind is going like, and also Northern Ireland, and it is the whole history of the world and class consciousness. Now, in answer to these questions, it's not just a question of making people get a tear in their eye for the brutality of the oppression that we all know exists in this world, but the question I think my brother here might have leaned on, I'm a little out of it. I'm so oppressed myself that I apologize ahead of time for the fact that I'm not a great speaker. I'm a guy that should write a book. I can't write a book. Okay. But that being said, my message to the people here is, yeah, we're right. But if we don't have an army, some kind of especially in the United States of America, a working class organization that is based on the sheer potentiality of the power of the masses of the working people, just in this country alone, if we were going to do it that way. I mean, it's going to play out internationally. But right now, I'm looking around. During this thing, I was thinking about, what do they think about Ukraine? What are they saying about Ukraine? Because I'm a Trotskyist. I shouldn't even be in this room because this is mostly Stalinist, but it doesn't matter to me anymore because I've noticed that some of my Stalinist comrades are starting to take the right position. No, because these things are important. When it comes to certain levels of struggle, people, I've always defended what I considered the gains of the Cuban Revolution for the working class internationally. The fact that the United States is against it, it's not the United States in general, it's the ruling class of the United States. All right, it's the lack of the point is we're all trying to get the same thing. We have different methods of doing it. I don't believe in this we got to do it like just as activists and waking up in the morning and being hero. All right. It's not an individualist thing. My point is we have to organize a workers. We have to start fighting en masse. We have to connect ourselves to the struggles of people that are on strike now, whether it's Amazon or whoever it is.
Okay. Yeah.
Anything that's got balls, because they are cutting off freedom of speech. If you see what's going on, especially Ukraine.
I don't want to cut you off, but we have
I'm just
only
saying
10
Ukraine
minutes
is important
because
we don't even have freedom of speech anymore. You can't even say,
hey,
oh, maybe Ukraine is wrong and maybe Russia should win, because they were attacked by NATO. All right, this is the world we're living in. So that being said,
thank you for your critique, and we will address it. We will address
workers of the world unite.
Yeah, thank you. All right. If there are a couple of, we only have 10 minutes left. So the brother back, Bill, who just came back, and then the brother in the front. And please be short so we have a chance to respond. Please go ahead.
I used to work with a group here in the States that was called the Wheels of Justice, and it was run by Kathy Kelly and Mazem Kumsia, who is a Palestinian American that went back to Palestine, and he's teaching there now. And we used to go around the country and we talked about Palestine and Iraq. We tried to put the two together, like what we're doing in Palestine with giving money to the Israeli army and the stuff, and what we were doing in Palestine, what we were doing in Iraq, like teaching. They were taking people from Israel to Iraq and teaching them how to go through, knock holes through people's houses so they could go and not get hurt. And to me, that was the biggest thing that was going on in the United States about Palestine, was because we traveled on an old school bus and we went from state to state to state. And I did this for almost 10 years. And on top of it, I would do that. And then when school was out, then I would go to Cuba with Pastors for Peace. You know, so I see the similarities between this and that, you know, where you know, we continue to hurt these people throughout the world, and we don't do it, but our government does it. Corporate America does it. And we need to stop that from happening. We need to put the brakes on. But we always say in Pastors for Peace, we go forward. We don't back up. We don't back up. And so we're going forward. And we're going to help as much as we can help, no matter who needs our help. Thank you.
Do I need to use the mic? I got to use it. They're recording it. Heard. Gotcha. Hello, y'all. My name is Niles Lattimore. I just returned from Cuba as a student at Casa de las Americas for 2 months, and it was a wonderful time. I want to yes and something. I want to say resistance and thriving. My ancestry is my diaspora. So when I think of my ancestry and my diaspora, I think of the Maroons of Jamaica, I think of the Cimarrones of Cuba, and I think of the Seminoles of North America. All of those people who have escaped enslavement, teamed up with the indigenous in the mountains, and resisted and thrived. And that is a mentality that I feel is very important to think about, especially when we live in a reality where we're paid to be compliant. So I just wanted to yes and that. And I also wanted to say, talk a bit about the Haitian Revolution, just to yes and that as well. Toussaint Louverture had two main motifs of the revolution, which was the restoration of agriculture and liberation for Black peoples. I just came from Cuba, where Coca-Cola and beer is more accessible than water, where vegetables were not affordable in many cases. I suffered from 2 parasites because of this condition there, and I'm still recovering. Thank God I'm alive, but it's tough. It is hard. And those 2 ideals that Toussaint Louverture had in mind are very important to me, and very they need to be centered in our work for the wellness of all peoples. I want to just end real quickly with the magic I was able to see in person, magic in resources and communication. They talk about how the colonizers, when they first arrived in Africa, took our jollies, our entertainers, and our griots, and our agriculturalists, our farmers, and our botanists, to displace the people first before capturing people. We need I forgot what I was going to say, but my point is, our magic is very much alive. And for me, when we think of these ancestral, these rhymes, these historical rhymes, the night before the Haitian Revolution, there was a legendary dance that took place, a legendary voodoo dance that took place that honored Yamaya, that honored Alegua, and that honored Ogun, the warrior of the forest, who used a machete. And we talk about that machete as being powerful because that machete was used in battle and it was used to make plátanos. So our magic is still alive. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I don't know where you are, but I want you in my class. Okay, so we don't have much time, so I'm going to give each person 2 minutes to speak, and then because we have to wrap up, but also remember, this is an ongoing conversation. So we start with Claudia.
Yes, and the magic is equated to mystica. Mystica is the spirit of struggle, which is very concrete and very material. And the reason that I bring it up is because in the United States, when we talk about magic, We imagine something that's out of this world and has no connection to what we create as people who are in resistance. Cuba talks about it as creative resistance. You make do with what you have, and you make sure you do it well. I do want to say to the question, our mayor from Brooklyn raised, I'm sure the Brooklynites will support. You asked a very important question, which is a question that we have been struggling for years. And I say, we people in the United States, how do you move the hearts and minds of the working class? And I think that the precondition is for people to understand that they are the working class. That it doesn't matter the power of consumption that we may have. We might be able to buy an iPhone, but if we don't get paid, we become homeless. If we don't get paid, we can't eat. We can't feed our children. So this notion of because I consume, I am better off than the people in the global south needs to go. So we need to acknowledge and identify ourselves as poor, working class people. Because if we are able to acknowledge ourselves as such, then we're able to connect with the poor and working class across the seas. That's the precondition to it. When we're talking about the material, I'm so upset that Matt had to go. It's okay, but it's Trotskyist, Stalinist, Leninist. The largest strategy is communism. How we get there, we're going to figure it out, and not everybody has to be on the same tendency to make sure that we move things where we need to move it. That's the first thing. Those, issues that Marx and Lenin and Stalin and all of them fought over, that some of it was petty. Quote me on that. Some of it was. To the more concrete of where we are today, the reality is that there hasn't been a revolution that has not been won without unity. And the basis of the unity is the interest of the working class, of the poor and dispossessed. I feel like in the United States, a lot of us are too occupied fighting on the internet about who's a Stalinist and who's a Leninist and who's a, just leave that to the, folk back there. Right now, what is pressing is how do we develop a strategy where we're able to build and move forward based on principled unity and for the interests of the poor and working class, working from their material conditions. People are losing their jobs. People don't have access to health care. People are losing their homes. People can't buy food. There's an inflation. Do our people even, they feel it, they might not have the language. They hear it, they might not understand it, ideologically, because we're not doing our job. We're not doing our job to help people understand. And so I think that there's a lot that we need to do to be able to move towards a working class revolution. Do we have pre-revolutionary conditions? I believe we do. People are feeling it. People are feeling it. Can they make sense of it is the question. Can they understand themselves as part of a larger body is the question. What is the role of people who have that knowledge? What is the role of organization in that process? These are all questions. And so what you asked is a blueprint, my friend, that I don't have, but that a lot of people have been working towards building. And for as long as we're able to connect with people who are thinking along the same lanes and we're able to go out and do the organizing that needs to be done, we most likely would advance more than we have in many years at this moment.
It's always hard to go after my sister Claudia, because I'm like, once again. No, and it's always good, because she hits it out the park in such important ways, but I was like, darn, I wish I'd smoked first. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I'm serious that Claudia really, she speaks so eloquently to all of these points. So just to underscore what she laid out that I think is so important is, and I get what the brother was saying, but I think it takes a lot of different approaches. I think it is about talking about what does touch at our heart, because we're human and we can't lose our humanity behind the madness that is the world in which we're confronted with. We can't become them. We've always got to remember that, part of this is the work that we do is because we really truly do see a better world is possible, and we're ready to fight and to make that happen. So I think that that's one aspect. But and I joked when I said reading is fundamental, but reading is fundamental, and we do need to have opportunities like this. We need to have spaces like this. The People's Forum is a very special place that brings together so many different resources, whether those be in the form of people or film or books or just an opportunity to come and have a coffee and engage with all kinds of folk. This is the kind of environment that is going to help us make that revolution a reality. Because I agree with you when you talk about there being the preconditions. There's no doubt. But you're right. How do we guide those steps and take us in a direction that's really going to fundamentally push for the things that Audrey just spoke about? How do we concretely take some, a hard look at what's going on and figure out the ways that we can realistically take that kind of direct action, which I feel you. And we've been saying that, just coming back from Cuba, saying here we are, I've only been kind of really engaged in this since the early 90s, but here we are 30 years on saying a lot of the same thing. But, how is it that we shake things up and do this in a different way? That's what we've got to continue to, I think, grapple with. And I think making the links, obviously, between these different struggles is really critically important as well. So but I feel really empowered and not empowered. I feel emboldened by, folk that are newer to this reality, but that are coming with the sense of passion and commitment and trying to just do what we've been talking about. How is it that we shake this up in a different kind of way? It's got to be an intergenerational struggle. And so I think that's, again, one of the beauties of not only the People's Forum, but venues, forums like this, is that it's an opportunity for us to kind of hear from each other, intergenerational, interracial, intersex. We've got to bring all of our family together, and from there, I feel we can begin to really make some concrete plans and steps towards what it is concretely we need to do to build that revolution. So those are my thoughts, but thank you.
Thank you both. I'm going to try to be very brief. I will begin with Audrey's point about seeing Israelis in Cuba. And actually, at one point, we were very bothered because Raphael Itan, who was one of the butchers of Lebanon and who called the Palestinians cockroaches, actually was helping with some kind of water projects in Cuba. And so I think there are contradictions, but I think part of it also has to do with the ways in which Israel and the Zionist movement has accused everybody who supports Palestine and Palestine movement of anti-Semitism. And I think this is something, one of the challenges, because actually when we were in Cuba, I was talking to people and it's kind of like every single time we'll start talking to somebody starts saying, we're not anti-Semitic. I'm saying, who's talking about anti-Semitism? Like, why do you, every time you talk about Palestine, you immediately discuss anti-Semitism? And let's sit down and we have a whole discussion about it and what does it mean and the Zionist history and the history of settler colonialism and so on, and the ways in which Zionism and Israel have been able to mix up the whole question, the Jewishness, the question of Jewishness and the multiple experiences of Jewishness with the question of Israel, in order to mix up things and make it only possible to see Israel as the only solution to confronting anti-Semitism. And this is something that's actually a very big issue. Also, the ways in which Israel markets itself, that it can do, and actually cannot deliver, because they really tried in many places in Africa and they failed. So they got engaged in the military trade and so on. I think there is a lot of ways in which Cuba actually sort of like backed out from some of this stuff, but I think we do have a responsibility to have this kind of discussion, because almost everybody who supports liberation of Palestine and knows that there is an apartheid and knows that it's really bad and so on, are very afraid. There is a chilling effect. And I'm moving now, I'm not only talking about Cuba, I'm talking about everybody. There is a chilling effect about what is going on, and there isn't enough understanding in the international community also, at the United Nations and so on, because people are still peddling the two-state solution. I mean, this is And there is also a huge thing about Islamophobia around Gaza. And I want to say, when people are talking about unity, really, in Gaza, I wish Max stayed, because in Gaza, you have an alliance of Islamists and Marxists and nationalists and people who are bourgeois and petty bourgeois, and everybody together actually coming together and fighting an anti-colonial struggle. I'm coming back to your question. But I think this is something that we actually, a lesson that people can come together and struggle together and build it. Okay, so that's one. The question of, it's like really amazing. You saw the messages. You saw the messages. The people who have been tweeting and so on, and social media kids, really, for me, they're kids, okay? I'm much older, okay? But they're young people who've been reaching the world despite all the difficulties in Gaza. Imagine that. Imagine their ability to tape. Imagine their ability to send, to tweet, to get it all this trend, right? Because I still don't understand. I still want to understand more. And they sent me, I said, this is what trending means. I still want to understand more. But this is what they're doing. And they, every single day, younger people wake up every single day. None of them have lived anything but the siege. No, and none of them. Okay, so this is something that's actually a big lesson to draw. The question of the labor movement, 100%. And one of the things, and I would really invite you to come, definitely the labor movement, the working class, but we do need a different, we don't have enough time today, but I think we really need to kind of rethink the traditional Marxist analysis and think about, I'm a Marxist, so I'm not reneging on that, but I think we also need to kind of think about racial capitalism, of what does that mean? How does race and class and gender and sexuality and all the various ways actually intersect and impact each other? How do they work with each other? And for us, actually, I'm talking now about Palestinians and the Palestine movement, one of the biggest issues now is the labor movement in the United States, because the leadership, and the guy says about Amazon and so on, we actually were at the labor notes conference, and there were lots of people struggling, and it's not actually accidental that some of the people who are struggling against Google and Amazon are some of the same people who are also protesting against Zionism and participating in this project called No Tech for Apartheid. So I think when people actually think about it, it's another discussion. This is not, we don't have enough time today, but if we think about it, the right-wing agenda is very much lining up, and the people who are opposing that are very much lining up. And it's not accidental that we are here to support Cuba and Palestine and people who are struggling against racial violence, against police brutality, against capitalism and the militarized industries and so on. It's not accidental. People think it's accidental. It's not accidental. We're very clear. And we're very clear in our agenda and what we think and so on. And the labor movement is one of the things that we are actually working on, building solidarity in labor around the whole question on which the leadership of the labor movement, FLCIO, has basically become a tool, historically become a tool of the State Department, fought in the Cold War with the State Department, worked on destabilizing multiple regimes around the world, Latin America and elsewhere and so on. And actually there is challenges that are happening from the labor movement, from the grassroots and so on, to this leadership to actually do it right. And it's not accidental that many of the people who are challenging are also supporting Justice in for Palestine. It's not accidental. It's not accidental at all, because these are interests lining up. I'm not going to take, because also I want to definitely build, yes, wheels of justice and building together and so on, and I know the people that you're talking about, and the ways in which we can connect with each other. And Niles, I think one of the amazing things about Cuba is the ways in which Cuba is run by the Communist Party of Cuba, which is a Marxist government, right, party. Cuba does not negate the spirit of Santeria, does not negate spirituality, does not negate the ways in which can think about where they're at. We were there in Casa Arabe, and next door there is a mosque in the middle of Havana. If you go and say that to anybody in people who do not really know in the Arab or Muslim world, they say, "Are you crazy? They're communists." And say, "Yeah, they are communists, and they are also there is tolerance, and there is a ways in which we can all work with each other and think with each other if we're working with each other on the basis of justice." But I also want to talk about the whole question of the art. Every single where you go to Cuba, there is music. Every single where, there's people who are celebrating life despite all the difficulties. So I do agree with you that it is not enough. And it is impossible for Cuba to completely be free and live. Thus, we're talking about lifting the blockade. When the United States is choking them, I mean, day in and day out, every single day, they're so inventive. If they spend 1% of that energy that they spend in suffocating the rest of the people of the world, on making the world a better place, the world will be a better place. So unfortunately, all these governments are corrupt and working with each other, all these imperialists, and they're all in the politics and the economics of war. They are in the economics and the politics of war, and they want to subjugate every single people. You go with us or we're going to crush you and break you. It's no prisoners, no prisoners policy now. It's not really about, oh, let's sit down and dialogue. No, no, no. We're going to crush you, whether we're talking about Trump being the nasty, ugly, very overt, or we're talking about the way Biden is trying to do it with the carrot and that guy was doing it with the stick. So a lot of policies are similar. This has to go. This has to go, and people really have to build. And this is one of our contribution coming together here. And I think really people may want to say, okay, well, so what is the next step? Aside from the bigger discussions and so on, bringing voices of this sort, being able to discuss with each other. I know that I learned a lot of things here. I learned a lot even when I was listening to the recordings. And we keep growing. We die learning every single day. And that is really the thing about us working with each other, listening to each other, engaging in the labor of love, engaging in the love of humanity, love of our communities. And it's not a fluffy concept, the whole question of love. It's really, you have to love your community in order to struggle. If you don't love your community, if you're doing it on the basis of hate and resentment, it's not going to work. It will. So I think this is where we're at, and this is what we need to do. And we do need to go tonight. We also have limitations of life and sleep and rest and work. So this is the reality, but this is to be continued. This is not the end of the conversation. It is continuation, not the beginning, but the continuation of conversation. So thank you all for coming. Thanks to the People Forum. Thanks for this amazing speaker. Love you all. Good night.